traffic. Little fair or foul. It's a new game we're going to play. All right, here we go. Follow along. We start in Chicago, where Super Bowl winning quarterback Jim McMahon had some biting words about the current state of the Bears. He said, quote, "It's where quarterbacks go to die." So, Brandon, as a former Chicago Bear yourself, are Jim McMahon's comments fair or foul?
First, look, I always respect the guys that came before me and paved the way. But, Jim, this is just foul, bro.
Knife him.
Like, I'm looking at the quarterbacks that came after Jim, and you have guys like Jim Miller, Rex Grossman, Kyle Orton. You got Josh McCown, Steve Walsh. You have Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh he's a great coach, but he was an okay quarterback. Mike Glennon, Chase Daniel. I can go on and on. The only name that jumps out to me is Jay Cutler. Smoking Jay Cutler was the only guy that you could look at and say, he's a star. He's the face of the franchise. He can carry us for the next 10, 15 years. But what happened when Jay got there? Jay was in that pocket being abused. That's what was going on. I mean, they beat the competitiveness out of Jay Cutler. Oh, look, nice highlights. Wasn't expecting this. But Jay Cutler had everything that you needed out of a quarterback. We're talking about super smart guy. We're talking about a guy who can make all the throws. We're talking about a guy who's strong and athletic. I mean, this dude grew up playing running back and safety and corner. But they did not protect him. Now, Jay didn't do his part and just stay strong until help arrived. It wasn't until, 2013, 2014, where they drafted Kyle Long, where they went and got Bushrod to be our left tackle, and they had Clausen. Like, this team needs to do a better job of surrounding the stars on the offensive side. Why? Because they always said it's the monsters of the Midway. That's the Chicago Bears way. And they like to stick to tradition, Nick. And what is that? Defense, defense, defense. So this is foul.
Yeah. And I like that we found Jay Cutler highlights because that's Brandon's guy. And one of them is a very nice throw. And the other one is Brandon bailing him out for a touchdown on a terrible throw where Brandon was the only receiver in the league who could have gotten there because he's 6'5" and he reaches behind his head. This throw is a nice throw. Let me give Jay credit. That's a nice throw. This next throw we're about to show is a Brandon Marshall highlight, not a Jay Cutler highlight. That's about to get picked off by the safety and Brandon saves it. But Brandon's point is right. And in this regard, listen, America, you know, what are the two things Kevin Wildes hates the most in the world? Injustice and mimes. Similarly, you know, what are the two things that are most important to me? Take integrity and historical accuracy. And Jim McMahon's take has no integrity, and it is historically inaccurate. Because, as Brandon laid out for you, for a quarterback to go there to die, it implies the quarterback was previously alive. And that's not the Bears quarterback story. The Bears quarterback story is it's a bunch of guys who were never good anywhere, except for Cutler, who was essentially the same guy in Denver that he was in Chicago. He didn't get worse, but he also didn't get better. He was this, I think Brandon would probably agree, he got older and got more experience, but he was a good quarterback in Denver. He was a good quarterback in Chicago. So Wildes, I just think Jim McMahon's a little bitter. I don't think it's right that quarterbacks go to die in Chicago. I just think the Bears have made the very odd NFL strategic decision of not emphasizing the quarterback position for 70 years. It hasn't exactly worked out. We'll see how the next 70 go. They've decided they're just not going to focus on that part of their football team.
Yeah. So, okay, they tried, right, with Trubisky. They gave it a shot. They said, we believe in somebody, we're going to trade up. And somehow, Ryan Pace still has the keys to the car, even though they crashed it. So why don't they do that again, Brandon?
It's amazing.
Like, we heard so much talk about, like, trying to give Seattle a king's ransom for Russ. They've got the 20th pick, the 52nd, and 83rd pick. Why don't they make an aggressive move to move up? If Patriots at 15, well, the Bears are at 20. So why don't the Bears package something up to get maybe Trey Lance, maybe get your guy Kellen Mond if he's not, maybe they can grab him at 52. Are you reaching? Well, why don't I don't know. You tell, like,
but will you
the
be
Bears
reaching?
need a quarterback.
Right. Well, they may be reaching, Wilds, and I think that's going to be the quickest way for Ryan Pace and everybody else in company to be out of there, right? Like, they're already on the hot seat. Now you go out there and you reach, and this guy's a bust. Now you're definitely out there. But before we move on, really quickly, am I that predictable where you guys knew? Did our producers knew I was going to talk about Jay Cutler? You guys had these highlights just ready to go and ready to roll? I'm that predictable?
Yeah.
Gosh.
On certain topics,
Are you kidding? Yes.
There are, not on everything.
Yeah.
Brandon, you absolutely surprise us a lot. But spoiler alert, America, if the Jets, Ryan Fitzpatrick, or Jay Cutler come up, we know what Brandon's going to say. Like that is, so yes,
or someone
you haven't hit us with a curveball on the, exactly
Call me, Jay.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Call me, Jay. I miss you, man. I miss you, Jay.
When it comes to ball security, we'll also know exactly where you want to go with that. All right, let's talk some basketball now. Legend Dr. J knows a thing or two about the game. Had this to say recently about the Brooklyn Nets. He said they're, quote, buying a championship like the New York Yankees once did. Brandon, throw it back to you. Are Dr. J's comments on the Nets fair or foul?
Respect the legends. Respect the legends. But, Dr. J, this is foul. You know that, Onk. You know that is foul because this is the same team that when you look at the Nets, comparing them to the Miami Heat back in the day when D. Wade and Chris Bosh and LeBron James teamed up, that spent that 20% of their cap on those three teams. Like, there's no cap in baseball. There's a cap in basketball. They're doing what they're supposed to do. So all this talk from Dr. J and even our guy out there in Philly talking about, well, they can't keep this team together. How are they going to do it? Well, tell your general manager, tell the president, tell the owner of your team to be smart and spend the cap wisely.
Yeah.
Okay. I got a few interesting things from Hall of Famer Julius Erving. So I switched it up. I'm also predictable in the Hall of Famer Julian Edelman, Hall of Famer Julius Erving, both two great players. I learned two things, Nick. One, Dr. J considers himself far more associated with the 76ers than the Nets. It was really like a 76ers party, and the Nets, maybe it's because they changed the jersey. If you go back to the jersey in the old ball, maybe you'd be happier. Two, he brought up an interesting point where I feel like it's right there sitting there for us, and we haven't talked about it a lot. He said that he believed in the 76ers because of Doc's experience over Steve Nash's. So I asked Dusty to make a graphic. I said, Dust, can you just drive home how much more experience Doc has over Steve Nash? And you talked about it yesterday that he had a bad week, Nick. When you look at this, say, you coached 55 games versus 1,600, and Doc's got 16 playoff appearances and you never got there. I think eventually, if the game is half dozen of one, six of the other, that you got to give the edge to Doc. So if it comes down to it, I think Doc's experience is going to make a huge difference. And thanks to Dr. J for surfacing it for us.
Okay, so let me respond to that quickly and let me answer the question. I tend to agree with you, but what's unfortunate for Doc is a lot of those playoff runs have ended in his team having a 3-1 lead or a 3-2 lead and somehow walking off the court in Game 7 losers. And so, and that's how last season obviously ended. So I do think the coaching experience matters, but I don't think all of Doc Rivers' experience, not Dr. J, Doc Rivers' experience is good. Now on Dr. J. Now I am obligated morally to say this part of it. Dr. J is one of the most historically and criminally underrated athletes in American history. People don't know what he did in the ABA. He was the best player in the ABA every year the ABA existed that he played. He then teamed up with another historically underrated guy in Moses Malone, your 12th and 13th greatest players ever, for one of the greatest teams ever, that Sixers team that won the title. So now that I've said all that and I've paid homage to Dr. J, let me say this. He is factually 100% wrong. Brandon is right on the most important point, which is there is no cap in baseball. You can just buy players. You could in theory, you could FC Barcelona, Real Madrid the thing, and just say we will pay more than the next three teams combined. Come here. The other thing that the Nets must get credit for, it's not sarcasm, it's absolutely true. They planned for this.
Oh, wow.
They built something of a culture. And now most of those guys are gone, but they built something of a culture to distinguish themselves from the Knicks, who were just lost all the time, which made them somewhat attractive. They didn't make bad free agent signings, so they had the cap space for 2 max guys. Insert Kyrie and KD. Then, because of their player development, when Harden comes available, yeah, I know Harden wanted to go there, but Houston had to want to trade him there. And they had Karis LeVert and Jarrett Allen as legitimate young pieces. Now, Houston idiotically didn't want either of those guys because I don't know what they're doing. But in a 3-way trade, those were the key pieces. And so they are not buying a championship. Like, they have built this team fair and square. And by the way, I obviously don't think they're going to win the championship. But this is not the Nets or the Red Sox or the Dodgers playing by a different set of rules. Everyone was eligible to sign KD and Kyrie. They had the cap space. They chose to go there. And then the Sixers tried to trade for Harden. The Nets ended up getting him. So I totally disagree with Dr. J's commentary in that regard, Jenna.
Still, though, your 12th favorite player. Best player of all time, right?
12th best player of all time.
Busy night.
Yeah,
busy
teamed up
night.
with 13th,
there
Moses.
you go, for Kevin Wilds. Deep into the night, scouting the weird and the wonderful, like this. Vladdy Jr. with the longest home run of his young career. He came a triple short of the cycle last night, but not quite weird or wonderful enough for Kevin Wilds. What do you got for us, Kevin?
Oh, we'll start with the weird. Remember when Conforto got hit by a pitch, won the game? Nelson Cruz said, sure, I'll do that. That's what we're doing now. Umpire's like, no way, buddy. Come back here. He's like, what? I got hit. No way, the ump says. You got to come back. You put your elbow out there. Like, huh? Didn't you watch the Mets game? That's not how it works. I got hit.